definitely good morning to you, Peter.
Thank you so much.
You're joining us from quite far away.
Yes, I'm just outside New York City, and so early morning on Monday here. It's just about 5 a.m. Local time, and we're launching our the sort of full-featured version of Minerva today, and so this is the start of my launch day, our launch day, and I'm excited to celebrate it with you here.
So yeah, and it's great to have you on stage and also talk about sort of what you're doing today and how that, of course, plays into the growth hacking. But before we go into that, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. You worked for a number of startups over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. My background starts really with civil engineering. I have a civil engineering degree, which to me spoke a lot to planning and thinking strategically about it, because a lot of the classes that I was taking were how to build buildings, how to build bridges, and thinking about that from all of these different dynamics. These are projects that are multi-year projects, and being able to see all the moving pieces, get all of the materials on site, and see how all of those different timings need to fit together, certainly fits into a lot of the business applications that I've ended up going into down the road. I don't know if I would say time off, but I took a different path after college and joined the American Peace Corps. And I lived in Burkina Faso in West Africa for 3 years, worked as a teacher, and then I worked with an NGO for the last of my 3 years there. And so I really, through that experience, discovered a passion for entrepreneurship, which I just didn't see before. I thought I was going more toward international development, but I was able to see how individuals and small groups of people in Burkina Faso were having huge impacts on the ecosystem, which I think now we would call the ecosystem. Perhaps at that point I might have just called it the private economy or the I don't know what I would have called it. But that really pushed me toward trying to find opportunities to educate myself on how to be more entrepreneurial, how to build businesses, how to think about building groups of people that are all moving in the same direction together. Landed in New York City from that point. And I was very fortunate to end up in New York City right at a point where the entrepreneurial ecosystem was really evolving and exploding. Probably 5 or 6 years after that, I think New York City became the second most investable city, the second most venture dollars invested outside of the Bay Area in San Francisco. And I was able to meet an incredible amount of people, learn so much, both good and bad, through a lot of different startup experiences. I joke, but it feels true that I've had a different job every 3 months for the last 10 years. And a number of those were at the same company. Even within Minerva, I think my role within the company as the company has evolved has probably changed every 2 or 3 months over the last 12, 13 months that we've all been working on it together.
But you do have, I mean, your title, Hard Problems, kind of gives your management, say, put Peter on this, it's a hard problem.
Yeah, that's very much the case. And it came out of a place of basically saying, there's a bunch of things that with a small team, and we have 3 co-founders, Joaquin, Craig, and Raphael, who respectively are the CEO, Chief Product Officer, and Chief Technology Officer. And so it kind of came out of a place of where are all the gaps between those 3 roles where I can step in and take on everything that they can't focus on. And increasingly, what that's meant in practice is that every few months I've been able to originate a new role, a new kind of discipline within the company, and we've been fortunate to be able to hire people where I can then hand off that set of responsibilities. So sales was a good example of that. We did a lot of before I joined the company, there was a whole round of pre-product customer interviews. I don't even know if you could call it customer at that point, but they were just trying to assess whether there was a problem, whether there was a there. When I came on, that had been somewhat established, but we were not at product market fit. And so a lot of my role became the sales, which in large part is sort of a more robust version of customer interviews, where we're actually going out and saying, we're gonna, we're asking you for money for this first version of the product that we built. Are you willing to pay for it? And that's where the rubber meets the road. I also think a lot of times we can go out and have a lot of very exciting conversations that are sort of self-validating. Well, I have this idea and this person told me it's a problem, so I should go out and raise a whole bunch of money. But when you go out and you've built the first version of the thing and you're asking people to pay you for it, and they have to pay the new invoice every month, then it becomes much more challenging, and you have to be much more focused on whether you're solving a real problem for them.
Yeah, and delivering that value that makes them pay that invoice that next month when it comes.
That's right. And so we've been fortunate to then hire a head of sales, Jamie, who's been wonderful and really taken it on. And we have some very exciting things and conversations coming down the pike. And she's really providing a whole bunch of unique perspective with her background in sales, which I don't have. She can see so many things that we can't see just because she's so experienced in that discipline.
So when you now, yes, you said you're building up the team, and your role was to kind of fill the gaps between the different C-suite people and kind of growing a new role, and then you recruit somebody into that. And that, of course, makes your company also grow as an entity. And that's why it's great. I mean, I really appreciate of you being here, and for you who have joined just recently, Peter is calling in from New York this morning, so it's 5 a.m. Because growth hacking, that word for me, I think I came across it the first was maybe 2017 when we had a startup brand event, and I was also feeling a little bit mysticism about it, but now I know more. And so maybe like, what is growth hacking, and kind of how does it work together with sales and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I was saying this just in the few minutes before our interview started. I think so much of it starts with a product that solves a problem, or a thing that solves a real problem for people. And if you don't have that, then sort of hacking growth is not ultimately going to be effective. It's going to turn into you're effectively spamming people with something they don't want and trying to manipulate them into doing some action that they wouldn't have taken otherwise. Growth hacking for me, and I think growth hacking done correctly, is finding as many different ways as possible to get a useful product in front of the people who need it. And the useful piece is important. The people who need it is also important, meaning knowing who you're trying to get in touch with. And so for us, as an example, I'll give a live example, because we have a hypothesis with Minerva that Minerva will be very helpful for teachers. Minerva at its core is a tool to help create clickable instructions for anything on the internet. And so if you wanted to show someone how to do something, you can use Minerva to click through and create a dot that will show someone all of these, let's say it's 6 steps to do something. It will actually follow them through the process as they're clicking through it. And so for teachers, especially teachers in quarantine, it's very difficult to communicate to students and to parents different processes that the students or parents need to follow. They need to fill out forms. Students need to do research or do various projects where they need to be instructed how to do something. And so for us with this hypothesis, then we need to really break that down and start to say, well, let's think about, and let's do some interviews here. Do we want to go to public school teachers? Do we want to go to school administrators? What are the other nuances of who's going to resonate with this the most? Let's go ahead and actually talk to people. And so over the next month or two, that's what we'll do. Once we have a better sense then of which of those, of whether any of those personas really resonate with our tool or not, and who has the biggest pain point, who really feels that pain the most, then we can start to think about, where do these people spend their time? Where do they actually exist? Do they go to meetups? Do they spend time in Clubhouse? Do they, where are all the other places that we could get in touch with them? And then we have to figure out, what are the tactics that we can use to actually let them know in that place where they already are, what Minerva is and how it can be helpful. And so I think that's difficult. It's a lot of work. I don't know if you'd call that hacking or not, but it's certainly a way to reach a lot of people without spending money.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it really becomes valuable.
Yeah, but you bring up some good, important parts, is because we are talking about growth hacking, and at the same time you're talking about interviewing people, interacting with the customer. So to sort of debunk that, so what is growth hacking not, if you take that as kind of a taking that away? That's
right. Now the tactics can be very important and very exciting, and there's some interesting challenges and questions around how do you get your offering in front of people without paying for that privilege, because the default would be, well, we just have to pay for ads. We have to go to LinkedIn or Facebook or Google and say, give us this audience and we'll pay X number of dollars per click or per view. That can be useful if you've gone through that process and identified exactly who you're targeting, and you know that that's the best place to reach those people. What we're doing today, I think, is a really interesting example. We're using a platform that's popular in the US, at least, called Product Hunt, producthunt.com. And we have, the way that they structure this, we have a 24-hour period to try to get as many votes as possible. We're competing against other projects who are launching on the same day. And we're hoping and attempting to get the most votes of anyone, so that we would be #1 on Product Hunt. And having that opportunity to reach out to people and be on the front page of that website for a day is really important, and it's free. The more votes we get, the higher up we are on the site, and the more likely that more people will see us. And so being at the top of the page in and of itself gives us more visibility. But then hopefully being able to say that we were the #1 product of the day gives us much more additional visibility. And this is all, it's free to us. Now, we've spent the last 3 to 4 weeks preparing for this moment. But a lot of what that's done is help sharpen the language that we're using. And so we're in a really good place. And we'd appreciate any votes that we can get from your audience. I'll share the link in the chat in a second. But it's really interesting opportunity to talk a little bit more in real time about why we're doing this, who we're targeting, and what we hope to get out of this moment.
Yeah, because it's a well prepared 24-hour drive, and this event being one of those hours, and I know your other colleagues are also working to drive traffic to Product Hunt. But as any startup, any startup in this list, watching this video or in this call, it's one way of, as you said, it doesn't cost you, it costs you a bit of time and planning, but otherwise it doesn't cost you anything.
That's right. That's right. Yep. So that trade-off is important to think about as well. We have, as a investor-funded business, we have a runway. We have a limited amount of time where we need to offer results back to our investors and to ourselves. And so that New York, right, is famous for the time value of money, the New York minute. But we do have to think about that time value trade-off. What's the amount of time that we have to invest for the expected return? And so that absolutely is a factor for us. We launched a preliminary version of our product in August of 2020, and we got excellent results, which has led us then to double down on this as a great platform for reaching a preliminary audience of early adopters who will get very excited about our product.
Yeah, so your focus is getting maximum attention and on a shoestring budget, and you do it within 24 hours or call it one very long working day.
Yes, that's right.
As you said, you did a test first in August, and you learned from that, so you're doubling down, you're building on top of that.
Yes.
And so and in the beginning of this call, we also talked about the team. But if you're a founder and you don't have a team, what can you do if you're a single person? How do you build your team around that? And what could you, so how do you get started?
Yeah, I absolutely appreciate that. Because I've felt that personally many times in saying, I have this thing, but I don't know exactly where to begin. It depends very much on what it is that you're building and what you're hoping to accomplish. I would say some of the things to start with is, honestly, for me, this goes back to grade school. When I was a kid in English class, I remember this moment of saying, well, who is the audience for the thing that you're doing? In this case, who are you hoping to reach? Who do you think is the right or the ideal person to really resonate with the thing that you've built? And then go out and talk to a few of those people. There's a good story for me that I don't know how relevant this is going to be in Hong Kong, but I'll try to universalize it as much as possible. If people have heard of Seamless is an extremely popular and now publicly traded food delivery platform. And so their innovation was being able to connect restaurants with consumers and facilitate the ordering and delivery process. Seamless started in New York City with lawyers at lunch. And it's now this big universal, you can order from almost any restaurant in almost any city. But they started with lawyers at lunch because they figured out this key insight, which is for lawyers in New York City, time is money. And so if they have to spend 15 minutes or 30 minutes going out and getting lunch or being on the phone ordering lunch or any of these things, that's money that they're losing. And so they will be willing to pay extra money, let's say a $5 fee per order, just for the privilege of not having to think about it. They're actually making money by ordering on Seamless instead of going down to the local deli or getting on the phone. And so that specific key insight was the thing that led to this massive growth, because they figured out what was the very target of their bullseye, and they were able to then spiral out a whole bunch of learnings to then go to larger and larger segments.
And that target, that bullseye, I guess, then became their metric, sort of what should we do more of? And
absolutely, and a very good litmus test of hypotheses. So we think that if we do this, our business will improve. We find the smallest way to test that. So we build a small version of that, and then we can show it to this audience of people that we have. And so even for someone who's in the earliest stages, that same cycle, you can start at a very early point. Draw something on a piece of paper and show it to the person that you think is going to have the pain that you're describing, and see how they react to the drawing that you put on a piece of paper. If you can write code, write the shortest, smallest amount of software that you can to show to someone the thing that's in your head. Like, get the idea out of your head as fast as possible, show it to the people that you think are going to be the audience for it, and then actually listen to what they say. You have to avoid the confirmation bias because you're excited. You actually need to objectively listen to whether someone is saying that it is something that they will use. And typically, in what I've found really with Minerva for the first time, is what you're looking for is someone to say, where have you been all my life? It really needs to be a strong and compelling reaction to the thing that you show them. Meaning, I will pay for this. I need this today. Please help me. This is amazing. That's the reaction you're looking for.
Yeah, that you were disappointed if it disappeared. Just
Yes.
to connect back to that, so basically when you as a founder have something which is valuable for your company and then for your client, that could be then what we call your North Star metric, which is something is individual for each in a company.
That's right.
So where are we kind of, you did your product hunt launch, test launch in August, you're doing another one today, 24 hours. Will it be viable to do this in 6 months in the future, or is the world changing so fast that kind of how do you adapt to that when it comes to presenting your product?
Yeah, it's a great question. Our success today is certainly not guaranteed. We're doing everything that we can to make it successful. If we do not achieve the outcome we're hoping for, which is to be number one, and if we don't start to see user accounts kind of fall out of that, then we'll change approaches. I think one of the important things here is this is by no means our only strategy. We need to constantly have multiple ideas of what's going to work and what's not going to work that we're consistently testing. I personally believe that today is going to be important to us, and so we certainly have put a lot of energy into it, and we're very excited for it. I also think that so if this day does go well, which of course we hope it does, then our next move will actually be to start to drill down on more specific target audiences, like I mentioned, educators, and actually do a specific product hunt launch for each of the major target audiences that we've been able to identify. Then we have to ask for teachers, how many teachers are there on Product Hunt? We have to go back and do that same questioning that I had mentioned earlier. Well, as a matter of fact, the people who are really on Product Hunt probably tend to skew male, probably tend to skew very tech savvy. And they probably work in startups and software as their primary industry. And so that key insight might tell us, well, is there a platform like Product Hunt that is more focused on education? And we have to go back and ask, where do educators find and adopt new technologies? And so for that, when we're talking 4 to 6 months from now, Product Hunt will probably not be the right platform for educators. But we also think that Minerva has a great application for people who are building new software as a service products. And that Product Hunt is the perfect place to talk to those people because that's exactly where they launch their products. And so it's constant evolution, it's constant learning and trying to create the opportunity for unbiased learning in as many different places as possible.
And all of these ideas that you collect, or these future plans, how do you collect them, or how do you, in your team, work together to make sure that what's the next idea you're going to go for, and maybe what idea you tested? Yeah,
it's a wonderful question. We have a lot of hypotheses as our team has gotten bigger. The challenge of communication has become greater. And I think that's a natural aspect of scaling a team. It also means that we have a lot more smart people who can help us come up with hypotheses. And so there's a trade-off there, certainly thinking more about communication. Our Chief Product Officer, Craig, who I think may be listening in, is instituting a new practice called Shape Up from the product perspective, which I think is quite interesting and worth Googling. And there's a whole book available free online. It's created by the folks who created Basecamp. And the concept here is that from a product perspective, there will be moments where several people within the company come to the table and kind of make a pitch for what they think is the next big thing that we should be working on. And so we're taking inspiration from that internally. We're taking hopefully some learnings there about how that's going to work on the product side of the business, and then say, well, is there something similar that we might be able to adopt from a growth tactic and strategy perspective? Can we actually say, well, we have these 18 different hypotheses. Should we pitch them to each other? Should we try to stack rank them? How should we choose to prioritize which ones we go after next?
Yeah, that
still an open question.
Yeah, that book Shape Up, I definitely will Google it and find it. I mean, there's so much learnings out there from people who've done it before. And what is the sort of before we move into Q&A, kind of if you were listening to this call, what would you, apart from Googling Shape Up, what would you do after this event to get started with growth hacking? What's the best first step for a founder?
Yeah, I think take a step back, think about the audience that you're hoping to communicate with, and then think about, of the tactics that you're deploying, of the ways that you are attempting to communicate, are you doing it efficiently so that you're actually reaching the audience you're hoping to? Because a lot of folks are just sort of broadcasting to the world, and in the startup parlance that I'm familiar with, we might call it boiling the ocean. You know, if you're trying to boil the ocean, you have to start with a small pot of water, and you have to kind of take it out and focus on just that small pot. And so I would encourage folks to just take a step back, think about it for a second, go after that small pot, figure out what it is. And then make sure that you're in a place of listening and not just broadcasting, meaning actually try to hear what people are telling you. It is certainly important for entrepreneurs to be focused and visionary. But if you're just, you know, barreling straight off the cliff, no one's gonna reward you for that. You know, if people are trying to yell at you, like, come over here, I actually need your help. And if other people are saying, like, I'm really not interested, I mean, I appreciate all the work that you're putting in, but this is just, it's not something that we really need. Listen to that and see if you can actually change your approach.
Boiling that small pot of water before you attack the ocean, that's a good point. So as we said, this is a part of your 24-hour launch event. We'll yet again share the link to the Product Hunt site, and so also people can go out and not only hopefully vote for Minerva, but also to check out what Product Hunt is. So what's happening after this hour now that we are at Startup Grind? What's the next step in today for you after the Q&As, of course?
Yeah, well, if a few folks here are interested, then we'll hop on Clubhouse for a little after hours chat. And beyond that, we're actually going to be live streaming our launch for the entire day. So I think we'll probably start between about 6 and 7 a.m. here. And on that Product Hunt link, there's also a link to the live stream, which is not open yet, but we will open it once more folks wake up on this side of the world. We have, I believe, 15 or 16 different guests who are going to come into the live stream at different times throughout the day, just to keep chatting with them about Minerva, why they're interested in it, what's exciting to them about it. This is, I would say, an influencer tactic. We're welcoming different people in who each have different audiences, and we are hoping that they will extend the reach, extend the message of, please come to Product Hunt today. We'd really appreciate your vote, and thereby then also extend Minerva as a product to their audiences and say, hey, this might actually be useful for you.
And then, yeah, as you said, building on your networks and your colleagues' networks to create this whole day. So it's great. Yeah. How do people connect, before we move to Q&A, how do people connect to you, Peter? What's the easiest way?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say LinkedIn and Twitter are both great. If anyone is interested in Minerva itself or potentially using that, then I'll also offer my Minerva email address there. And then through the Q&A and through Clubhouse, I'm happy to, if people have questions that are specific to their business and they're not, and it's something that we could address in a minute or two, I'm happy to take time now also to think through some different business ideas.
Yeah. So big thank you, Peter, for being our fireside chat guest today at the Startup Grind, all the way from New York. Margaret, so we'll move on to the Q&A section.
Okay.
Good. Yep.
Yes. We have 3 questions, and please, the audience, if you have more questions, please put it in the chat. And I will start with the first question from Jack.